"Do not search for me, Kale." The words were written in Elara's hand, but Kale read them twice before they made sense. Morning light spilled through the windows of her room, touching an untouched bed, an open wardrobe, and the empty chair where she usually sat with Heart's records spread across her lap. Elara was gone. Kale stood perfectly still, the letter trembling once between his fingers before his hand tightened around it. Rowan entered behind him. The east gate has no record of her leaving. Neither does the main entrance. Kale looked toward the wardrobe. One coat was missing. Her walking boots were gone. So was the small canvas bag she had carried when they visited the old medical annex. Nothing had been overturned. No window was broken. No furniture had been disturbed. She left willingly, Rowan said. Kale's eyes returned to the letter. No, Rowan waited. Kale swallowed. She chose to leave. That does not mean she wanted to. The evening before, Elara had been sitting in the Blackstone library while rain whispered against the tall windows. Kale was resting upstairs under the physician's orders, still recovering from the compound that had left him unconscious the day before. Rowan had spent the morning tracing Daniel Mercer's movements after his sudden departure from Blackstone. Mira was comparing the damaged appendix with Dr. Samuel Hart's surviving records. For the first time in hours, Elara had been alone. She opened a volume she had borrowed from the Western Archive and found a folded piece of paper between 2 pages. There was no name on it. Only 3 lines. The king survived because the dose was measured. Stay beside him, and mercy ends. Ask what happened when Clara refused to disappear. Elara stopped breathing for a moment. The first sentence could have been rumor. By now, half of Blackstone knew Kale had been poisoned. The second could have been an empty threat. But the third was different. Clara's disappearance 19 years earlier was buried inside records Rowan had only recently recovered. Very few people knew Elara had begun connecting Clara's flight to the concealed air. She folded the note and slipped it into her pocket just as Mira entered. "Any luck?" Mira asked. Elara forced her attention back to the open book. Not yet. It was the first time she had deliberately hidden evidence from someone she trusted, and the choice sat heavily inside her. An hour later, she visited Kale. He was sitting near the window in his private room, irritated by the physician's insistence that walking across Blackstone did not qualify as rest. "Rowan posted another guard outside your door," Kale said. "I noticed. He wants 2. You want 4. Kale gave her a tired look. "After yesterday, 4 sounds reasonable." Elara almost smiled. Instead, she studied him. His color had returned, but exhaustion remained beneath his eyes. Someone had already used her presence to reach him once. Someone had framed her, poisoned him, and prepared a law designed to separate them. Now that same unseen hand was promising that the next warning would not be measured. Kale noticed her silence. "What is it?" For one dangerous second, she nearly showed him the note. Then she imagined another cup, another collapse, another room where she could do nothing except wait for him to wake. "Nothing," she said. Kale did not believe her. She could see it immediately, but he did not force the answer from her. He simply held out his hand. Elara looked at it, remembering everything he had taught her about choice. Then she placed her hand in his, already knowing that before sunrise, she intended to take that choice away from both of them. Elara kept holding Kale's hand until his breathing grew slower and the tension in his shoulders finally eased. The physician had ordered him to rest, and for once, exhaustion accomplished what authority could not. "You should sleep," she said. Kale watched her through tired eyes. "You should tell me what you are not telling me." Her heart tightened. Even weakened, he still saw too much. "I am worried about you." "That is true." His thumb moved gently across her knuckles. "It is not the whole truth." Elara looked toward the rain-darkened window. She could show him the note. Rowan could lock Blackstone down. Guards could follow her everywhere. Kale could order every entrance watched. But someone had already reached his cup inside a guarded council chamber. Someone had placed evidence inside her room. Someone had known about Clara before the secret had spread beyond a handful of people. More walls did not feel like safety anymore. "Rest," she whispered. "We can talk tomorrow." Kale studied her for another moment, then released her hand. "Tomorrow." The word followed Elara into the corridor. She returned to the library and opened Hart's records again, this time searching only for Clara. For nearly an hour, she found nothing useful. Then, inside a copied medical ledger, She noticed a notation written beside the date Clara had disappeared with the hidden child 19 years earlier. The handwriting belonged to Dr. Hart. Transfer completed before dawn. Distance preserved both lives. Elara read it again. Both lives, not only the child's. Someone else had been protected when Clara left Blackstone. She pulled the damaged appendix beside the ledger. The concealed heir could only be confirmed beside the living Alpha King. If the same pattern had existed 19 years ago, Clara's disappearance might have prevented two people from being brought together. Elara's thoughts returned to the anonymous warning. Ask what happened when Clara refused to disappear. The wording no longer felt random. Whoever had written it wanted Elara to believe staying beside Kale would place him in danger. The frightening part was that recent events seemed to support it. Since her arrival, Kale had challenged the council for her, reopened sealed records because of her past, survived a poisoned drink during their investigation, and refused to let the Hart inquiry be suspended. Elara took out a blank sheet of paper. She wrote each event in order, then drew a line through them. Every path returned to the same point. Kale beside her. Near midnight, Mira found her still sitting beneath the library lamp. You were supposed to be sleeping too. Elara covered the anonymous note with Hart's ledger. I could say the same to you. Mira placed a folder on the table. Rowan traced Mercer as far as a service station 28 miles north. After that, nothing. Was he alone? We do not know. Elara looked down at the timeline she had created. Mira noticed it. What are you trying to prove? I am trying to understand why everything becomes more dangerous whenever Kale and I get closer to the truth. Mira pulled out the opposite chair. That does not mean you are causing it. I know. Elara's answer came too quickly. Mira heard it. Do you? Elara folded the timeline. Did Clara ever return after taking the child away? Not according to anything we have found. And both lives were preserved. Mira frowned. Elara, what are you thinking? Footsteps sounded in the hallway before Elara could answer. A guard entered with a message from Rowan, and Mira turned toward him. Elara used those few seconds to slip Hart's note into her folder. By the time Mira looked back, Elara was standing. I am thinking Kale needs one quiet night, she said. She returned to her room and waited until Blackstone had settled into silence. Then she opened her wardrobe, removed one coat, her walking boots, and the small canvas bag from the annex. On her desk, she placed the timeline, the copied appendix, and a blank page. For several minutes, she could not make herself write the first sentence. Finally, her pen touched the paper. Do not search for me, Kale. Elara stopped after the first sentence. The words looked colder on paper than they had sounded in her mind. She turned the page over and tried again. This time she did not begin with goodbye. She began with what Kale deserved to know. She wrote about the warning hidden inside the library book, the reference to Clara, and the reason she had not shown it to Rowan. Then she wrote the part that hurt most. Every time they cannot reach me, they reach you. Her pen paused. She remembered Kale collapsing beside the council table, his first instinct not to accuse her, but to warn her away from the cup. She remembered him waking and speaking her name, while half of Blackstone believed she had betrayed him. Staying beside him felt like courage. Leaving felt like cowardice. Yet Clara had once faced the same impossible choice, and Dr. Hart had written that distance preserved both lives. Elara could not ignore that. She placed the anonymous warning beneath the unfinished letter, then copied Hart's notation onto a separate page. If Kale found everything, he would understand where her reasoning had begun. He might never forgive where it ended. Before leaving, Elara needed one more answer. She returned quietly to the library and searched the old transportation records connected to the medical annex. Clara had not used Blackstone's main road 19 years earlier. A supply ledger showed a wagon leaving through the Eastern Service Passage shortly before dawn, carrying medical linens to a property Hart owned north of the estate. The destination had been written only once, Brier Glen House. Elara found the property on an old county map. It stood roughly 30 miles north of Blackstone, beyond a narrow road that crossed wooded hills and abandoned farmland. If Clara had taken the hidden child there, something might remain. Elara folded the map and returned upstairs. She had nearly reached her room when she noticed light beneath Kale's door. She should have kept walking. Instead, she knocked softly. Come in. Kale was awake, sitting against the pillows with a book he clearly had not been reading. I thought the physician told you to sleep. He tells me many things. Elara stepped inside. Kale studied her coat. Are you going somewhere? Her heart stumbled. I could not sleep. Neither could I. He closed the book. Sit with me. She did. For several minutes, neither spoke. Rain had stopped, leaving the windows silver beneath the moonlight. Kale finally said, when this is over, I want one ordinary morning. Elara looked at him. What qualifies as ordinary for an alpha king? Breakfast that nobody tests for suspicious compounds. A small laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Kale smiled. That would be a start. The tenderness of the moment almost destroyed her resolve. And after breakfast? She asked. You tell me where you want to go. Anywhere. Anywhere that does not contain a sealed archive. She lowered her eyes. Kale's expression softened. Will you be here when I wake? The question struck harder than accusation ever had. Elara could not lie to him. Not directly. She reached for his hand instead. Rest, she said. I will make sure you are safe. Kale watched her for a long moment, as though some part of him heard what she had refused to say. But exhaustion eventually pulled his eyes closed. Elara waited until his breathing settled, then quietly left. Back in her room, she packed only what she could carry. She placed the unfinished letter, the timeline, the anonymous warning, and copies of the appendix on her desk. At the bottom, she added one final sentence. You taught me that love does not take away another person's choice, and I know leaving does exactly that. I am sorry. Before dawn, Elara followed the old Eastern Service passage beyond the sleeping walls of Blackstone. She did not know whether Brier Glen House still stood. She only knew Clara had once taken the same road, and 19 years later, someone was trying to make Elara follow her. By the time the first light reached Blackstone, Elara was already miles beyond the Eastern Service passage. She had walked until the estate disappeared behind the wooded hills, then paid cash for a ride at a roadside gas station without giving her name. Every mile north made breathing easier and harder at the same time. Kale was farther away. That was the purpose. It was also the pain. Back at Blackstone, Kale woke to silence. For several seconds, he expected Elara to be sitting near the window, pretending she had slept more than she actually had. The chair was empty. He remembered her answer from the night before. I will make sure you are safe. Kale was out of bed before the physician could stop him. Rowan met him in the corridor. Elara is not in her room. Kale stopped. Where is she? We do not know yet. Mira approached carrying a list from the night guards. No record at the main gate. Nothing at the west entrance. The East Service passage was checked shortly after sunrise, but by then she was gone. Kale looked at Rowan. Was there any sign someone forced her to leave? None. Then she found another way out. The physician appeared behind them. Your Majesty, you should not be walking through the palace. Kale did not raise his voice. Then walk with me. Rowan almost smiled. But the expression disappeared when they reached Elara's room. One coat was missing. Her walking boots were gone. The canvas bag from the medical annex was no longer beside the wardrobe. Everything else remained exactly where she had left it. Kale saw the papers on the desk immediately. He crossed the room and stopped before touching them. Rowan. Rowan stepped beside him. We document everything first. Kale waited while Mira recorded the placement of the pages and Rowan examined the desk. Only then did Rowan hand him the first sheet. Kale recognized Elara's handwriting. Do not search for me, Kale. His jaw tightened. Below it, she had written about the anonymous warning, Clara, and Dr. Hart's notation. Rowan picked up the folded message that had been hidden inside the library book. His expression changed as he read it. She received this yesterday and told nobody. Kale kept reading. Elara had listed every event since the investigation began. The forged evidence, the poison cup, the emergency amendment. Beside each event, she had written who had been placed at risk. Kale's name appeared again and again. At the bottom of the timeline, one sentence had been underlined. Every time they cannot reach me, they reach you. Kale lowered the page. For a moment, the room became painfully quiet. Mira looked toward him. She thinks leaving protects you. I know. Kale picked up the unfinished letter. Elara had written that he taught her love could not take away another person's choice. She admitted that disappearing violated the very lesson she had learned from him. Then came the final lines. I can survive losing your forgiveness. I do not know if I can survive losing you. If distance preserved both lives once, maybe it can do so again. Kale stopped reading. He sat slowly in the chair Elara usually used, the letter still in his hand. Rowan said nothing. Neither did Mira. Kale stared at the empty room as though he could still see her there, surrounded by records, trying to solve everyone's danger by removing herself from it. She thinks this is love, he said at last. Rowan's voice was quiet. Is it not? Kale looked down at Elara's apology. Part of it is. His thumb rested over the last sentence. The rest is fear wearing love's name. Rowan unfolded Hart's copied notation. If she followed Clara's reasoning, she may also have followed Clara's route. Kale lifted his head. Then find the route. I can issue a royal retrieval order. No, Rowan paused. Kale stood, weakened but steady. Find my wife. Find where she went. But nobody brings her back by force. He looked once more at the empty chair. She took my choice when she left. I will not answer that by taking hers. Kale did not leave Elara's room until Rowan had copied every clue she had left behind. The anonymous warning went into evidence. Hart's notation was compared with the transportation ledger. Mira searched the old county maps, while Rowan traced the Eastern Service route beyond Blackstone. Kale remained beside the desk, reading Elara's unfinished letter again, not because the words had changed, but because he was beginning to understand what she had not written. She had not left because she doubted him. She had left because somewhere beneath all the courage she had built, a frightened part of her still believed that when danger followed her, the kindest thing she could do was disappear. I found something, Mira said. She placed an old map beside the timeline. Brier Glen House. Dr. Hart owned it 19 years ago. It is about 30 miles north. Rowan compared the map with Hart's ledger. The Eastern Service Road would have connected to the old county route before the highway was built. Kale stood. That is where she went. Probably, Rowan said. Not certainly. Kale gave him a tired look. You really do know how to comfort people. It is one of my lesser talents. Under different circumstances, Elara would have laughed. The thought made the empty room feel even quieter. 30 miles north, Elara stood before a weathered two-story house surrounded by tall grass and bare oak trees. Brier Glen had survived, although barely. Its white paint had faded to gray, and one side of the porch leaned slightly toward the ground. She tried the front door and found it locked. Around back, beneath an old metal awning, she discovered a small lockbox attached. To the wall, Hart's ledger had contained 4 numbers beside the property entry. Elara entered them. The box opened. Inside was a key. That unsettled her more than finding the house abandoned. Hart had left a way inside, and 19 years later, it still worked. The key opened the kitchen door. Dust covered the counters, but the room was not untouched. A narrow path across the floor was cleaner than everything around it. Someone had walked through recently. Elara did not follow it immediately. She remained near the doorway, listening. Nothing. No voices. No movement. Only wind pressing softly against the windows. She took out her phone. There was almost no signal, but she typed a message to Mira anyway. I found Brier Glen. I am safe. Do not bring Kale here until I know why Clara came. The message remained unsent. Elara slipped the phone back into her coat and followed the cleaner path into a small study. Most of the shelves were empty. One cabinet still contained medical journals from Hart's years at Blackstone. Beneath them, Elara found a wooden document box. Inside was a single envelope marked with Clara's name. Her hands went still. The letter inside had been written 19 years earlier. Samuel, if they discover where I took her, tell the king I did not leave because I feared him. I left because the council gave me no other choice. Elara read the sentence twice. Her assumption collapsed instantly. Clara had not simply decided that distance would save everyone. Someone had pushed her into disappearing. The next line made Elara sit down. They told me the same thing they always tell frightened women. Leave quietly, and the man beside you will remain safe. Elara reached into her pocket and unfolded the anonymous warning from Blackstone. Stay beside him, and mercy ends. Different words. The same message. Her heart sank. She had not escaped the pattern. She had obeyed it. Back at Blackstone, Rowan entered Elara's room carrying a newly recovered archive sheet. Kale. Something in his voice made Kale turn immediately. Rowan placed the document beside Clara's route. We found an old council transportation order from the night Clara disappeared. Kale read. The authorization. Clara had not chosen Brier Glen on her own. A council office had directed her there. At the bottom was an administrative reference mark identical to the obsolete mark on the forged documents from the poisoning investigation. Kale looked toward the northern road beyond Elara's window. They wanted her to follow Clara. Rowan nodded. That is what it looks like. Kale folded Elara's letter and placed it carefully inside his coat. Then we stopped following their plan. Kale wanted to leave for Brier Glen immediately. Rowan refused to let urgency become carelessness. If someone guided Elara there, arriving with a royal convoy tells them exactly what we know. Kale stood beside the northern window, already dressed despite the physician's objections. Then no convoy. And no royal retrieval order, Rowan said. You made that clear. Kale looked at him. I am going to find her, not arrest her. Mira entered carrying copies of the transportation order and a newer county map. There is another problem. Brier Glen has not officially belonged to Hart's estate for 17 years. Ownership passed through 2 holding companies, then disappeared into a private trust. Rowan took the map. Can you trace the trust? Eventually. Kale's expression hardened. We do not have eventually. Rowan pointed to a narrow road approaching the property from the south. Then we take one vehicle, stop before the house, and approach without announcing ourselves. You stay with me. I am the Alpha King. Today you are also recovering from poisoning. Kale stared at him. Rowan did not blink. Fine. At Brier Glen, Elara continued reading Clara's letter. The pages were fragile, but the words felt painfully immediate. Clara described receiving warnings after questions began about the hidden child. She had been told that remaining near Blackstone would endanger the reigning Alpha and expose the child before the proper time. Then came a sentence Elara had not expected. I believed them because they used my love against me. Elara closed her eyes. The anonymous note in her pocket suddenly felt heavier. She had thought leaving was an independent decision. Now she understood that someone had carefully placed the same fear in front of her that had once been placed before Clara. She continued reading. If she ever learns what I did, tell her this. Protection chosen through fear is still fear. I pray she becomes brave enough to stay where I could not. Elara pressed the page flat against the desk. Clara had written those words 19 years ago without knowing whether the child would ever read them. Elara looked around the abandoned study. She had followed Clara's route, carried Clara's fear, and nearly repeated Clara's disappearance exactly as someone intended. If Clara had been sent here 19 years earlier, Hart might have left more than one letter behind. Elara returned to the shelves and examined them carefully instead of searching at random. Dust covered nearly every book in an even gray layer, except for one medical journal near the end of the middle shelf. It sat several inches farther forward than the others, and the wood behind it showed a narrow line where dust had been disturbed. Elara pulled the journal free. Hidden behind it was a small metal switch set into the back panel of the cabinet. She hesitated, then pressed it. A section of the cabinet released with a quiet click and opened several inches. Inside were more documents wrapped in faded cloth. Elara reached toward them, then stopped. On top lay a sealed envelope bearing an old royal crest. Across the front, in Hart's handwriting, were 4 words, for the concealed heir. Her breath caught. She carefully lifted the envelope from the compartment just as her phone vibrated. The message she had tried to send earlier had finally gone through. A second message appeared almost immediately. Mira, we know about Clara's transportation order. Stay where you are. Kale is coming, but only to speak with you. Elara stared at the screen. Kale was coming. Relief rose first, followed instantly by guilt. She imagined him reading the letter she had left behind. She imagined the empty room, the choice she had taken from him. Another message arrived, this one from Rowan. Do not leave Brier Glen. We believe someone wanted you there. Elara looked toward the sealed envelope in her hand. That changed everything. If someone wanted her at Brier Glen, then the anonymous warning had not been designed merely to drive her away from Kale. It had been designed to bring her here. She moved back toward the front room and waited near the window, watching the empty road. 20 minutes later, a dark vehicle stopped nearly a quarter mile from the property. 3 figures stepped out. Rowan first, Mira beside him, then Kale. Even from that distance, Elara recognized the way he moved more slowly than usual. He should still have been resting. Instead, he had crossed 30 miles because she had decided fear gave her the right to leave without him. Elara opened the front door before they reached the porch. Kale stopped several feet away. Neither spoke. Rowan remained back with Mira. Kale looked at Elara as if confirming she was truly standing there. Then his gaze dropped to the envelope in her hand. Did you find what you came for? Elara swallowed. I found out I came for the wrong reason. Kale's expression softened, but he did not move closer. Then tell me the right one. Elara looked down at the sealed envelope, then back at Kale. Someone wanted me afraid enough to leave you. Kale said nothing. He waited, giving her the space to continue. Clara received the same kind of warning 19 years ago. Not the same words, but the same choice. Leave quietly, or the man beside you will suffer. Rowan and Mira exchanged a glance behind him. Elara stepped aside. There is more inside. They entered the house carefully. Elara led them to the study and placed Clara's letter on the desk. Kale read the final lines in silence. Protection chosen through fear is still fear. I pray she becomes brave enough to stay where I could not. His eyes lifted to Elara. She could not look away. I thought I was protecting you, she said. I know. That does not make what I did right. No. The answer was gentle, which somehow hurt more. Elara folded her arms against the cold of the abandoned room. When you collapsed, I could do nothing. I watched everyone look at me like I had caused it, and none of that mattered because all I could think was that you might not wake up. Then the warning came, and suddenly leaving felt like the only thing I could control. Kale took one step closer, then stopped. If you choose to leave me because that is the life you want, I will not drag you back. Elara's eyes burned. Kale, but if you left because you decided your absence was the price of my safety, then you made my choice for me. She lowered her gaze. I know. Do you? His voice remained quiet. You wrote that I taught you love does not take away another person's choice. Then you disappeared before I could tell you that I would rather face uncertainty beside you than safety built on losing you. Elara pressed her lips together. People keep getting hurt when they stand beside me. Then stop deciding that standing beside you is something I regret. The words settled between them. Elara looked at him again. He was pale from the journey, still recovering, still stubborn enough to travel 30 miles because she had vanished. I was afraid, she admitted. Kale nodded. Then be afraid beside me. For the first time since leaving Blackstone, Elara felt the fear inside her loosen. Not disappear, just become something she did not have to carry alone. Mira quietly turned toward the hidden compartment. I think Hart expected someone to find this eventually. Elara remembered the sealed envelope and picked it up. It says it is for the concealed heir. Rowan examined the old royal crest without touching the seal. Then we document it before opening it. Mira photographed the envelope and the compartment where it had been hidden. Rowan recorded the condition of the seal. Only then did Elara carefully open it. Inside were 3 pages in Hart's handwriting and a smaller document bearing an official royal mark. The first page began with a statement addressed to the child Clara had protected. If you are reading this, then the council failed to erase you. Elara's breath caught. Kale moved beside her, but did not take the letter from her hands. She continued. Hart explained that Clara had not been sent away merely to conceal a child's identity. Certain members of the old Northern Council had learned that the concealed heir would one day be required to appear beside the rightful Alpha King. They feared what that appearance could expose. Rowan leaned closer. Expose what? Elara turned the page. Hart had written one sentence beneath an older legal citation. The concealed heir does not challenge the rightful Alpha King. She confirms him. Silence filled the study. Kale's expression changed. Confirms him how? The smaller document contained the answer, but part of its lower section had faded beyond recognition. One phrase remained clear. Restoration of the Northern Covenant requires the willing presence of both. Mira whispered, the willing presence. Elara looked at Kale. Suddenly the pattern became painfully simple. Someone had not merely frightened her away from Blackstone. They had manipulated her into choosing separation. Kale understood at the same moment. They could not force you to disappear, he said. So they made you believe disappearing was your idea. Elara read Hart's sentence again, and this time the word willing felt more important than everything around it. That is why they never simply took me, she said. Rowan nodded slowly. If the covenant requires your willing presence beside Kale, forcing you away might not accomplish whatever they need. Mira looked toward Clara's letter. But convincing you to leave by choice would. Elara felt a cold understanding settle over her. The poisoned cup, the accusation, the threat hidden in the library book, even the story of Clara's disappearance had pushed in the same direction. Fear had been used not merely to frighten her, but to shape her decisions. Kale studied the faded legal document. Then whoever planned this knows more about the Northern Covenant than we do. And possibly more than Mercer does, Rowan said. We still do not know whether he created the forged records, delivered the warning, or followed instructions from someone else. Elara folded Clara's letter carefully. Then we stopped giving them what they want. Kale looked at her. He did not ask what she meant. He waited for her to choose the words herself. Elara glanced around Brier Glen, at the abandoned shelves, the hidden compartment, and the room where Clara's fear had survived for 19 years. I want to go back to Blackstone. Kale's face remained still, but relief softened his eyes. Because you want to? Yes. She took a breath. Not because you found me. Not because Rowan can order guards around me. And not because I suddenly believe nothing bad will happen. Her fingers tightened around the letter. I am going back because someone wanted me to disappear, and I almost helped them succeed. Kale nodded once. Then we go back together. Rowan began securing Hart's documents for transport while Mira photographed the hidden compartment again. Elara stepped onto the porch for air. Kale followed, but remained a few feet away. The afternoon had turned cool, and wind moved through the tall grass surrounding the house. You should still be resting, Elara said. I have been informed of that several times. You traveled 30 miles. Also mentioned several times. A faint smile touched her face, then disappeared. I am sorry. Kale looked toward the distant tree line. I know. That is not the same as forgiving me. No, Elara accepted the answer. Kale turned toward her. I was angry when I found your letter. She waited. Not because you left. His voice softened. Because you believed losing you was something I should be grateful to survive. Elara's eyes lowered. I did not think of it that way. Fear rarely gives us enough time to think. She looked at him. Were you afraid? Kale gave a quiet breath that almost became a laugh. Elara, I woke up and my wife had vanished after someone poisoned me and framed her. Yes, I was afraid. The simplicity of the admission reached her more deeply than reassurance could have. The Alpha King was not pretending fear made him weak. He was simply refusing to let it choose for him. Elara stepped closer, stopping before the distance between them disappeared. May I? She asked, holding out her hand. Kale looked at it, then placed his hand in hers. Yes. No promise was spoken. None was needed. Behind them, Rowan called from the doorway. There is one more page. They returned to the study. Mira held a thin sheet that had been stuck beneath the royal document. Hart had written only a few lines before. The ink faded. Rowan read the clearest sentence aloud. The Northern Covenant cannot be restored by blood alone. The rightful Alpha and the concealed heir must appear before the royal record without coercion, each acknowledging the other. Kale looked at Elara. That explains willing presence. Mira pointed lower on the page. There is another line. Elara leaned closer. Only part remained readable. Upon restoration, all council authority derived from the disputed succession shall be subject to review. Rowan went completely still. Kale understood first. This was never only about proving who I am. Elara looked at the old council mark. It could challenge the authority of everyone whose power came from that succession. Rowan carefully placed the page with the other evidence. Which means someone may have spent 19 years making sure the two of you never willingly stood before that record together. They returned to Blackstone before sunset, not as a king retrieving a runaway bride, but as two people who had chosen the same road after nearly allowing fear to choose for them. Rowan carried Hart's recovered documents directly to the secured archive room. Mira remained with him to create copies and compare the royal marks against the records from the poisoning investigation. Elara stopped inside the entrance hall. Less than a day earlier, she had crossed the Eastern Service Passage believing distance would protect Kale. Now the wall she had fled no longer felt like a trap. They felt like the place where someone had expected her to surrender. Kale paused beside her. Still want to be here? Elara understood why he asked. Yes. Only then did they continue. In the archive room, Rowan arranged the recovered pages beneath protective covers. We have 3 separate facts, he said. First, Clara was pressured to leave 19 years ago. Second, someone used the same fear to influence Elara. Third, the Northern Covenant appears capable of reopening authority created by a disputed succession. Mira placed Hart's final page beside the damaged appendix. But we still do not know who sent the warning, or whether Mercer knew the entire purpose, Rowan added. Kale looked at the obsolete administrative mark connecting the old transportation order to the recent forged documents. Then we do not name a culprit until the evidence does. Elara glanced at him. That restraint mattered. Whoever had manipulated her had depended on fear moving faster than proof. She would not make the same mistake in another direction. Mira adjusted the pages beneath the lamp. There is something else. She had aligned Hart's legal citation with a surviving index from the royal record. The numbers matched a section sealed after the disputed succession 19 years earlier. Rowan read the entry. Northern Covenant. Restoration hearing. Attendance restricted to the reigning alpha, concealed heir, royal recorder, and 3 council witnesses. Kale frowned. 3 council witnesses chosen by whom? Mira traced the faded line. That portion is missing. Rowan leaned back. Which means we are not walking into that hearing until we know. Elara understood immediately. If the Covenant could threaten authority built during the disputed succession, then the witnesses themselves could matter as much as the evidence. Kale looked toward her. No more disappearing to solve that problem. A small smile touched her face. No more poison tea either. I strongly support both policies. Even Rowan almost smiled. The moment passed when Mira uncovered another line at the bottom of Hart's recovered page. Wait. She moved the light closer. Faded handwriting emerged beneath an old fold. Samuel Hart added something after the legal text. Elara read aloud. The concealed heir must understand that she is not the claimant. She stopped. Kale moved closer. The next sentence was clearer. Her acknowledgement exists to identify the rightful alpha and expose the false succession that followed the death of the former king. Silence settled across the room. Elara had spent weeks wondering whether her hidden identity made her a threat to Kale's throne. Hart's words said the opposite. She had never been hidden because she could take the crown from him. She had been hidden because she could help prove who had no right to control it. Kale looked at her. They were never afraid of. What you could take from me. Elara's voice was quiet. Then what are they afraid of? He turned toward the documents connecting 19 years of secrecy to the council surrounding them now. What we can prove together. Rowan reached for the final archive index, but a loose strip of paper slipped from beneath its cover. Mira caught it before it reached the floor. A name had been written across the strip beside the original Northern Covenant hearing date. Rowan's expression changed before he spoke. This is not Mercer. Kale looked at him. Who is it? Rowan slowly turned the paper around. Elara recognized the name immediately. It belonged to someone who had been inside Blackstone throughout the investigation. Someone who had questioned her past, watched Kale collapse, and argued that emergency authority should transfer before he woke. Councilman Everett Hale.